Okay, I call this deck the Devourer of Lands. Not really dealing with the strategy, but more the history of locusts. In any case, it's a massive drawing deck. It's the predominant structure of the deck and strategy, and let's get right into it. The basic makeup of the basic lands are 12 islands and 12 mountains. In this particular case, just for fun, I have all my mountains being foil and none of my islands being foil. I also have 4 red or blue producing lands, Shivan Reef and Fiery Islet are the ones that deal me damage, and also Steam Vents, pain lands or shock lands, I mean. Gaining life, bounce land, just enter play tapped, could come and play untapped. And let's see, Riptide Laboratory. It's from Onslaught. I pay 1 in the blue and I return target wizard I control to my hand. It actually is pretty helpful. It gives a little bit of a rescue, and I put this in a lot of decks just because I want to be able to not have to discard, whether by my own effects or my opponent's effects, just because I have too many cards in hand. It always bugs me. Alright, moving on to the next package. Alright, and this is my mana acceleration and mana cost reduction package. Pretty simple. Sapphire Medallion to reduce blue spells, Ruby Medallion to reduce red spells, and this reduces the cost of historic spells, so legendaries and other artifacts by 1. Pretty simple. Soul Ring, pretty standard. This is actually more for the mana fixing in case I start off with like 2 islands or 2 mountains, rather than the mana acceleration. Early on, this kind of helps me negate a little bit of the damage that I might get at the beginning, although it won't really do much later on, but it still has a little bit of mana acceleration, and this one's new to me, Nyx Lotus. It comes into play tapped, and my devotion to a certain color of my choosing gives me that much in that color. Depending on the time of the game, that can be a massive amount. And Gilded Lotus, standard 3 of any one color, definitely helpful. Alright, moving on to the draw package. Now, the first one isn't exactly draw per se, but you've seen it in other decks. Midnight Clock, a little bit of mana acceleration to begin with, and it's a recursion from the graveyard back in the library, and basically gives me a wheel effect. So that can be helpful at the beginning. And this one over here, Mana's Awakening, if I play it early on, nobody really wants to get rid of it because it also gives them a card draw, but later on it's just one-sided for me. Jace's Archivist, it's hand disruption for everybody, but I really need to keep cycling through this deck over and over again with how much I draw. And whenever I play my first spell during each opponent's turn, I draw a card. Wave Break Hippocamp. I never pronounced that right. Alright, and this one with a lot of flyers that I produce just from my commander alone, it basically gives all of them a curiosity effect. And since they're flyers, a good chunk of them are going to get through. Now, Thought Reflection isn't draw by itself, but even just by itself, even if I only draw 1 card per effect or per turn, it doubles it, and that can add up. Then over here, this one plays a few roles. It slows down my Super Friends players. And at the beginning of my draw step, I draw an additional card. Spells I play cost 1 less to cast, period. Doesn't matter what color or what type. And all those 1/1 flyers I make from my commander are certainly 2/2s. Alright, so I have a basic Brainstorm in here in case I need a little help during an opponent's turn. And for Alpha Striking, I have a little bit of Payback. Whenever they Alpha Strike at me, if I survive, I draw a card for each tap creature that player controls. So as long as they aren't doing a lot of vigilance, it gives me a lot of cards. And Keep Watch, I draw a card for each attacking creature, mine or theirs. Now, I know you see only 10 cards here. There's actually 20 cards in this package. Let's get to the second part. Alright, so Howling Mine and Font of Mythos. They basically do the same thing, just in groups of 1 and 2 extra cards drawn per turn. Then I have Mercurial Chemister. Just a quick 2-draw per time I tap it, but it has a second ability where I discard a card, and depending on its converted mana cost, I can help clear out some big baddies or thin out the herd or get rid of a creature with a ability that's slowing me down. Alright. Then this one I got from another pre-con years ago. And whenever I cast a spell, I put the cards in my hand at the bottom of my library and I draw that many cards. Helps me cycle through my deck and trigger all these draw effects and draw trigger effects. For example, I have 2 versions of Niv-Mizzet in here. Whenever I draw a card, it deals 1 damage to any target, and whenever I play an instant or sorcery spell, I draw a card. Guess what this does? Deal 1 damage to any target and tap to draw a card. Now, whenever I cast a historic spell, so just a bunch of these cards right here, whether they're artifacts or legendaries, allows me to draw a card. And then whenever I play my second spell each turn, I draw a card. Azami Lady of Scrolls, just by itself, it's a come into play, tap and draw a card, but I have a good number of wizards, and so it turns all of them, with or without an ability to draw a card, into an ability to draw a card, whether or not they have summoning sickness. Now, Mirror Magic, it costs 1 less for each instant sorcery spell in my graveyard. I have a decent number, so I could easily play this for 3 blue. And it has an upkeep effect, and they call it a knowledge counter on this one. But essentially, for each upkeep counter, knowledge counter, I get to draw a card. And as the game goes along, that's going to be a lot of card draw. So that's 20 cards in this draw package, about 1/5 of the deck. All right, next segment. Now, these all trigger on drawing and or playing instants and sorcery spells pretty much. Empty the Warrens itself gives me 2 goblin tokens, but it has Storm, so usually when I play this, it's a bare minimum of 4, and because I cycle through the deck so much and bring stuff back from the graveyard into the deck, I can play it multiple times a turn. A 5/5 flyer, just in case I need some big flying creatures, and it happens pretty quickly with the way I draw that I'll have 6 lands pretty much at the beginning. And instant sorcery spells, red elemental creature tokens. When I draw my second card each turn, so even my opponent's turn, I get 2 1/1 black creature tokens. And second card each turn, same difference except for 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens with flying. Also has a secondary ability to draw a card, then discard a card, so it gives me a looting ability. Now, Nadir Kraken, hopefully I pronounced that right, it basically does a similar effect as my commander, but I have to pay 1 for each card I draw to give me a tentacle token, but it also boosts the size of this creature, so pretty soon this could be, let's say, even a 20/20. It's horrific, isn't it? Alright, Tal'Ren Sky Summoner, 2/2 Drakes in case I need some attackers or flyers for blocking. This also gives me flyers in the form of bird illusion creature tokens for each instant and sorcery spell. Now, this one gives me 1/1 blue wizard human creature tokens for each instant and sorcery spell, and when there are 3 or more wizards, I get to transform it into Final Iteration, which still gives me those 1/1 blue human wizard creature tokens, but it also gives all of them +2, +1, and flying. So every time I play an instant or sorcery spell, I get a 3/2 flyer every single time. Now, this next package is just the damage package. As the draw package was predominantly blue, this is entirely red. So, instants and sorcery spells allow me to do 1 damage to target creature and opponent controls. Non-creature spells, 1 damage to each opponent. Now, this one actually doesn't do damage, but if a source I control would deal non-combat damage to a creature and opponent controls, I put that many -1/-1 counters on that creature instead. So it basically gives non-combat damage wither for all intents and purposes. And that works with my Niv-Mizzets, for example. Alright, and just because of all the tokens I'll be producing, A creature coming under my control deals 1 damage to each opponent. Impact Tremors, really cheap, common card. And whenever I draw my second card's turn, I deal 3 damage to any target. So 3 -1/-1 counters on anything every single turn where I draw 2 cards. And then everybody knows this one, Gutter Snipe. Each instant story spell, 2 damage to each opponent. Now, these are effectively my board wipe damage cards. Hour of Devastation removes Indestructible until end of turn anyways, and it deals 5 damage to each creature and each non-bolus planeswalker. Star of Extinction, 20 damage to each creature and each planeswalker, and I destroy a land. Blasphemous Act, in case they have a creature that I just can't deal with, or they have way too many creatures, 13 damage and reduction of cost for all the creatures on the battlefield. And then X damage, where X is the number of creatures I control. So if they have a major player that I just can't get around and maybe have trample and it's a huge creature, this can help me deal enough damage to clear the whole board, as well as that major player that they have. All right, next package. Now, this isn't really a life gain deck, but I just have a couple cards in here for life gain. One of them because it's Aetherflux Reservoir, and that also deals the damage. It kind of goes with the theme of the deck. And Tablet of the Guilds, basically I announce blue and red, so everything gives me 1 or 2 life card, 2 life gain whenever I cast a spell. Pretty much, except for just the artifacts or the ones that have devoid type of spells. All right, and again, it works with the theme of dealing 50 damage. All right, moving on. And because of how quickly I can cycle through the deck and how many times I'll probably have to discard before I get the right pieces in play, Elixir of Immortality gives me 5 life and shuffles my graveyard into my library. Same with Quest of Ancient Secrets, but I have to discard or have cards go to my graveyard at least 5 times while it's out. An instant allows me to shuffle anyone's graveyard into their library, so it also helps me get rid of some graveyard strategies, constantly milling themselves. Ugh. And it lets me to draw a card at instant speed. Reminisce, same thing, except sorcery and costs 1 less, and I don't get to draw a card. But having these 4 almost ensures that my deck will constantly be recycled. Yes, I'm going green in a blue-red deck. Now, these 12 cards are miscellaneous cards to help slow down my opponent. Whether it's with Snap and returning a creature and untapping lands, getting around any protection they might have with this Devoid spell to return a spell or creature to its owner's hand, and deal 2 damage and possibly remove a permanent from the game. This is another way that I help get around, come on, focus, hexproof and indestructible that my opponents may have. And just so I can try to maybe get rid of their commander for a long period of time, if it's problematic anyways. Get a free spell out of it, and I get to return 3 artifacts or creatures to their hands, so it slows them down. And all my wizards tap for either drawing a card from Izumulative Scrolls, or this one taps to make them pay it extra, so again, slows them down. My Xenograph, it's entirely there just in case something happens that is tribal related, but if nothing else is going on, this makes everything wizard, so all those wizard effect, essentially lords, get more support. This one, so I can make a creature lose all its abilities and become 0/1, and I could kill it off too. So if they have something like, I don't know, Avacyn, so making all their stuff indestructible, including Avacyn, I can make Avacyn a 0/1. All the creatures lose indestructible, and I can get rid of it. Also, when they play a big creature spell, I can make it go back to their hand and they lose a life. This one removes it from the game, and, manifests, but manifests when it's face down doesn't really have any abilities, so with the rest of the stuff in my deck, pretty easily taken care of. Now, Scour from Extinction, I definitely need that because I don't have much in the way of destruction of certain types of cards. And then Unwind, non-creature spells, untap up to 3 lands, gives me more opportunity. So that's how I slow them down with this deck. So there you have it. Devourer of the Land. Technically, I only had one land destruction thing in there, and it's not even about the land destruction for that one, but tell me what you think. Biblical proportions, yeah?